Good morning. You're listening to the Blaine's World podcast. You also may be watching it as well. And I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield. And I'm here in my Zoom studio in lovely Fairview, North Carolina. And each week we focus on positive news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And what we do each week is have the show, and you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. You can also listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you can't find it anywhere else, you can find it also at our website, www.blainesworld.net. It's my pleasure to introduce my two guests for this special show today. And they are, I hope I pronounced it right, Brandy Andrade. I'll eventually get it. And Brandy Andrade, and she's joined by Amanda McLaughlin. And you can wave to all your fans and friends who are watching this. Okay. And we're going to be talking about theater in general, but specifically we'll be talking about a show that these two folks are involved in. It's going to be a lot of fun, called Calendar Girls at Hendersonville Theater. And before we do that, what I typically do, Amanda especially, is first time I meet somebody on the air is try to find a little bit about them. So I don't know if Brandy told you this, but we have about 40 minutes to talk about your background, if you would. So and if you can kind of give the Reader's Digest version in 40 minutes or less.
I think I could handle that.
Okay. But specifically, how do you get into theater?
So that is a great question. I've always been really interested in like storytelling, even when I was like a wee child. And I remember the first performing kind of thing that I did was in the third or fourth grade. We were doing one of those little productions that you do in school. And the little girl who was the main narrator got sick. And my teacher pulled me to ask me to do it because she knew that I probably could like memorize, like I could remember things really well. And I just loved doing it. I thought it was the greatest thing ever. And I was like, there is something to this
What was the play?
Performance thing.
What was the play?
I don't even remember. It was just I want to say it was maybe a holiday play where we did like some singing and things. It was very short, but I remember really enjoying being on stage.
Because I had this idea, I may have run it by Brandy in the past. I have a great idea for a fundraiser for Hendersonville Theater or you name it, but everybody recreates their very first role, So in other words, you mentioned, you have children also?
I do, yes.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be great then if you could show them, if we recreated this, and then we could show them this was mom, when she first acted.
They would love that, I'm sure.
How old are they?
So my daughter is 8 and my son is 6.
So think about this. When you start pushing them into the theater, then they can see this, how mom got involved. So you saw that.
My daughter has already been involved in theater. Oh, yeah. So she was in Beautiful Cages.
She played Baby Me.
Yeah.
In Beautiful Cages.
At Magnetic?
Magnetic.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that was your daughter?
Yeah, so we had two. I'm not sure what night you went to go see. We double cast so that they didn't all have to have all performances, but she was the littler of the two. I don't know.
What a great show, though, wasn't that? And, for her to be involved, did she enjoy it?
Oh, she loved it. And she got the bug with that one, and she absolutely loved it and talked to them, all the cast, like they were her peers, like just jumped right in.
Her credit, again, I don't know which one I saw it on one of the times, but that was not a real small, that was a pretty significant part for a first play.
Yeah.
So that was great. So forget your daughter for a second, go back to you. So you acted as a child then. Where did you go from there?
So the next thing that I didn't really do anything for a while. My family weren't really artsy people. I was more like pushed into like softball and things like that. But in middle school, I was in Odyssey of the Mind. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's like a problem solving kind of situation. And they have different activities basically to do. And one is performance. And that year we were given the prompt of doing, I think it was either a Shakespeare show in a different time period or specifically Romeo and Juliet in a different time period. I don't remember, but we did Romeo and Juliet during World War II. And I played Romeo because it was an all-female cast. So that was my next like performing situation, which was a lot of fun.
And did you keep performing after that?
So when I got to high school, I performed a few times. I played Ophelia in a Shakespeare show. It wasn't Hamlet. It was a show of like all the different heroines in Shakespeare giving Juliet advice. But then I teched my first show. I did like props and just loved that experience. And then went on to learn how to stage manage. So that's what I've done more of in my life, is stage managing.
And let's talk a little bit about stage managing, because I have to thank you, as I did off the air, that I think in all the years I've been doing this show for different stations, you're only the second stage manager I've ever had on it as a guest. And let me ask you, for the folks who don't realize who a stage manager is, what does the stage manager do?
So the stage manager is the boss. No, basically, I'm in charge of making sure everything runs smoothly, and specifically making sure that I'm keeping track of the blocking that we do in rehearsal so that the actors can remember their blocking, helping make sure that props are being made or manufactured or bought, basically overseeing everything.
Put it this way. So far, she comes to rehearsal with me every night. She writes down everything I say about where the actors are going to move. She writes down everything that I say. Oh, okay, so there's going to be this thing over here that you're going to pick up. And she's like, okay, note to self, we have to have the thing and it has to be over here. And so-and-so is going to pick it up. And then in her spare time, she writes up reports about everything that happened so that all the designers can know what we talked about during rehearsal. And she's also done an analysis of the script where she went through and listed all the page numbers and every prop, every sound cue, every single thing that is listed in the script or that I have mentioned that we want, so that everyone's got like a document they can go to. And we also have 2 different scripts. And so she went through and collated so that the people who are using the PDF have a certain page number and the people who are using the book have another page number. It's like so much organizational stuff that the first thing I do is pick a stage manager, because they do so much stuff that I would not be able. Oh, and she sends out reminders before every rehearsal and every production meeting saying to the relevant people, hey guys, don't forget we have a meeting tonight or we have a rehearsal tonight and here's what we're going to be working on. It's an insane amount of organizational stuff that I can barely skid into rehearsal 5 minutes before it starts with my book, and I've just finished blocking. I did not send any emails. I'm not organized, and it's all written in little scribbly notes on stickies everywhere. It's her job to turn all that into something anyone can utilize.
I take director whimsy and make it functional.
Well, also, I've seen too, Amanda, sometimes when the director doesn't show or can't be there, or even, once the show is running, oftentimes the director's not even there, and then you take over.
Basically, once a show is up, I mean, there are some directors who like to come to watch, but their job essentially is done once the show goes up. So then I'm in charge of making sure that the show still runs the way the director has directed it to run. Mm-hmm. I make sure that I solve any problems that come about during any performances.
If a prop breaks, Amanda's going to figure out how to fix it.
If a costume splits a seam, I'll be sewing backstage really quickly before whatever needs to be done.
Well,
and she keeps the time. She's the one who tells everyone it's 10 minutes till go. It's 5 minutes till go, but not everyone's here. She's the one who's communicating between front of house and the actors and all the tech people who are getting ready to push the button to start. You can't start until everyone's in the same place. And so she's the clock. She's the one who says where we all stand and when we all go.
Yeah.
I'm thinking out loud. What we'll do here is, Brandy, we'll just have you step aside and I'll step aside. We'll just turn this whole show over to Amanda.
Seriously, everyone needs a stage manager, like in life.
Well,
I do actually, we always joke, like my husband, we actually met doing theater, and so he was an actor, I was the stage manager, and he jokes that I stage manage his life, he liked me bossing him around so much that now we're doing it for the rest of our lives. It's I have lots of people who I actually help them in their life too, because they're like, you're a good stage manager.
Well, it's interesting because the upcoming show at Hendersonville, points out a difference between your role here and other theaters, that at Hendersonville, Brandy, it seems she's doing like everything. At other theaters, they have separate, people to do each of these 10 different things. And that, I guess, at a smaller
that's
theater.
pretty much what a stage manager always does.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we do have obviously like
there are designers.
technicians and designers and like props masters and things like that. But I do the overall making sure everything's gonna work.
Right. She's not making all the props, but
Right.
she's got to talk. She's the one making sure that the props designers are finding out about what I said in rehearsal about a prop, so that I don't have to remember to tell them, oh, P.S. the prop has to be 3 feet tall because it has to cover X. Right. Amanda is going to hear me say that, make sure that note gets to the prop designer so that when they're building props, they're building what is right for the show. So at Hendersonville, we've got a full complement of designers, right. But there has to be one person who makes sure that all the right hands know what all the left hands are doing. That's Amanda.
And since we have another person involved in this, I'm sorry, Amanda, it wasn't going to be the whole show about you. Let me turn to Brandy a little bit. And Brandy, I've had the pleasure of interviewing in the past, and she's only been to Asheville now just a couple of years.
Yep, we moved here in early 2021.
But one of the amazing things about you is that when you got here, boy, you just jumped right in. You didn't have much time to get acclimated. And so I think I first met you through a show at the Magnetic Theater, or you've done a whole bunch of stuff. What are some of the stuff since you've been to Asheville?
Well, so I actually, my favorite story about moving here in the Magnetic is that during the pandemic, auditions had moved online.
Right.
So I auditioned for the Magnetic season from Texas and was actually cast in the middle of nowhere from Texas. And I actually drove into town with the kitties and all of our belongings in the car. We pulled up to our rental house. I took the kitties out in their cages into the house. I got back in the car, plugged in the coordinates, and drove to the theater for my very first rehearsal. It was literally the day we arrived here. So it felt a little auspicious. I thought, well, you know what? If I needed a sign that I had come to the right place and that I was going to be able to work, I think starting on your first day in a new place is a sign.
Again, remind me, what show was that?
That was in the middle of nowhere. That was
right. Yeah. I saw that. I think I've seen you in all the stuff you've been in, but let's backtrack like we did with Brandy. So your background in theater, you studied it, you teach it as well, but what was your beginning in theater?
So I think we talked about this last time because I hadn't thought about it for a long time, but mine was, well, other than singing in those Jesus coffee shops in the 70s that my parents were attending, my sister and I did little duets together. So that was maybe our very first performing. But the first theater that I ever did was a Thanksgiving play that I wrote for me and all the kids that I was being homeschooled because I'm a preacher's kid, and there were like 6 of us in our little homeschool pod. And I wrote this play where we went back in time. We got in a time machine, and the time machine sound effect was my cousin Jesse using the weed whacker while somebody filled a glass of water while someone pounded on it. So like, how it changes as the water fills up. And then in the background, I had this roar. So I was like, it's amazing. I didn't go into sound effects.
I was going to say that's some good Foley for kids.
I know, right?
Well,
so how old were your kids in a Thanksgiving play?
How old were you in that one when you wrote?
That was probably 6th grade, I think.
Now I have to ask you the same thing too. Do you have a record of that, or has that ever been recorded?
No, but I kind of remember the story, so I could probably jot it back down, and we could put Ruth and Gideon in it, and they could. We traveled back. Did we travel forwards in time first or second, and then back in time? And like the traditional story that we're all taught, where the Native American people and the pioneer people were having a meal together, right? So I think we learned about togetherness and thankfulness and all the things you learn about in Thanksgiving in the course of our travels in our spaceship.
I love that.
Well, that's pretty sophisticated for a little kid to be playing.
I was a preacher's daughter. There was going to be a lesson,
Right. I mean, that really is amazing. But it's too bad we have to. Let me just get rid of this. We have to do that sometime again. Can you imagine doing that at Magnetic or or Hendersonville to play this again? This would be absolutely great. And we already have two actors who are going to be in this. So after you did that, you got the bug at that point in time. Take it up from there.
Well, so okay, I would say the thing that really did it for me was in high school. I went to a Catholic high school, and I was growing up in Hawaii. I don't know that I had mentioned that before. So I'm on the Big Island of Hawaii, and I'm in this high school, and we had this amazing arts director guy. He was directing the Cardinal Singers, the choir where I was singing, and he also had written a play about the last princess of Hawaii, Ka'iolani. Oh, cool. And so we put on this play. We had this amazing young woman who just looked eerily like Ka'iolani. So we had a portrait of Ka'iolani in the lobby, and we took a picture of Nadine right next to it. And I mean, it was eerie and wonderful. But the story of Ka'iolani is that she was raised to be the queen, and she went away to boarding school in England. So I got to be some of her white friends that she became friends with in boarding school in England. And while she was there, Queen Liliuokalani was deposed by the pineapple and sugar kings, the white businessmen who wanted to take Hawaii over for their own interests. And so the monarchy was lost, basically. So Ka'iolani flies to New York. She does a goodwill tour trying to, I can't remember if it was Cleveland. I can't remember who was president, but she did this whole goodwill ambassador tour trying to convince the American people that they were better than this and that they didn't want to take the kingdom away from her. And the press, as you can imagine, was very racist. They thought she would be some sort of savage. And so, they'd call her the savage princess and stuff like this. Anyway, the queen was locked in her castle, in her palace. The monarchy was lost. The businessmen took over, and Princess Ka'iolani died at the age of 24. Yeah. Of a mysterious illness. There are probably scientific, and medical and germ reasons why she died, but there is no Hawaiian person alive who will tell you that she died of anything other than a broken heart. And so that is an extremely tragic and meaningful cultural story. And so we performed this story, and the audience was full of these old Hawaiians. I mean, so much crying, 10-minute standing ovations at the end. I still get moved talking about it.
Even as you're telling about it, I'm getting moved just listening to the story.
But
so we got to go to Oahu, and we took a program to the mausoleum where she's buried. So it was very much, if I was ever going to learn that theater and storytelling is important, I think that was when it really went all the way in. It was super fun to tell a Thanksgiving story when I was 12, but to be a part of this kind of meaningful cultural communication, just it went all the way down. And I've never stopped believing in the importance of storytelling.
Two comments on that. One, seems like a fantastic story just as you're telling it. I could see that being done. I mean, I'd still love to see it or something, food for thought in terms of bringing it to this area. I think it'd be a fantastic story. And two, you mentioned the teacher or the person involved in it. Is that person still around?
I have tried to find him over the years. I'm pretty sure he has since passed away, but he stayed at St. Joseph's Catholic School for many years after I graduated. And but I do think he passed away a few years ago. But his name was Clarence Waipa.
Okay, we'll give him a shout out. And what you should do, if you remember, send a clip of this to the school. Just tell them we were mentioning the schools here. They get such a kick out of it. And he got a shout out. So thank you if he's listening somewhere. That's a great story. But
and really, it's arts teachers like that who make such a big difference in what you believe in. I have no idea what the rest of the cast has gone on to do, but I know none of us have ever forgotten the power of that.
I'm just saying, keep that in the back of mind, because where I love to see that story now, but go from there then. So that was kind of the big thing you were in as a kid. You still stayed in theater, you studied it then, and you're still studying it.
Yeah,
you're teaching it now.
Talk
about what happened after.
So I went on to go to college, and I think somewhere along the line, I had decided I did more shows for the rest of high school, but that's the one that really did it. So anyway, I think I had decided somewhere along the way that I needed a really practical degree. So I was going to be a physical therapist, which is hilarious because I'm afraid of blood, needles. I don't do well under pressure. So how I came up with this, I think it was just a job that I knew of. I don't know. So my mom is taking me to college, and I'm waking up, it's going to be my first time. She's going to leave me there in Oklahoma and go back to Hawaii. So I'm about to be dropped off in the middle of nowhere and on my own. And I woke up terrified, seriously. And we were poor. So it wasn't like I was going to be flying home to Hawaii. Right. I didn't go home until the next summer, but anyhow, I woke up crying and I said, Mom, I don't think I want to be a physical therapist. And my mom was super calm. I think she was just waiting for me to realize this. And she was like, okay, well, what do you want to do? And I thought she'd get mad, but I said, I want to be in theater. And she just says, well, all right, then let's go to the theater department when we get over to campus. And we did. So I wound up being a theater major as an undergrad with a drama, television, and film degree. So I did a little bit of everything. And then I tried to quit again. I can't quit theater. When I went to grad school, I thought, no, grownups don't have, I don't want a master's degree in acting. That doesn't sound fun. I want to be a serious scholar. I am going to go to grad school for literature. So I wind up in these lit classes and sitting in the back having major imposter syndrome. And the only time I ever spoke up in class was the 2 times we discussed plays. And it turns out I have lots of ideas and lots of things to say about that. And so at the end of that first semester, I thought, gosh darn it, I don't think I can quit this. So I found a program. The University of Texas was offering a PhD track. I was in the master's program, but I ended up finishing and getting a PhD. It was a humanities degree. So you did aesthetic studies. And so all mine were theater. You did a certain number of courses in literature. So all of mine were American women's writers, basically. And then you did a certain number in history and philosophy. And I did American women's history and feminist theory. So by the time I finished my master's degree, I really sort of felt like, all right, it's time to pull all those things together. And my dissertation was on the first wave of feminism, at the turn of the century, the sort of the suffragists and the actresses who were doing George Bernard Shaw plays, and how they were using theater as a sort of consciousness raising device, which wasn't even invented until the second wave of feminism, but that's what they were doing. They were using theater to talk about not life as they saw it, and the fight that male critics were having, the reason they hated George Bernard Shaw and A Doll's House, Ibsen, all that stuff. And by the way, all those plays would have died if women hadn't loved them so much. They were all acted in and produced by women because women loved them and said, oh, that's me. I see my life in that. And male critics were saying, oh my God, these unwomanly trash heaps, these are horrible. They're not even human. So the fight was over what a woman actually was. Yeah. It was over the definition of reality. And women were using theater to live lives that looked either more like the lives they wanted to lead, or they were showing the tragedies that happen when you keep confining them and cutting off their wings and keeping them in these cages. And so that's how I wound up having a PhD in American women's history and feminist theater practices.
So when you said something before that, one of the things about theater, and you got out of it a little bit because of the pressure, there's a lot of pressure, but it seems you have the same amount of pressure, in terms of now what you're doing in directing and acting. Isn't that a lot of pressure?
It wasn't really the pressure. I don't know what it was. I kept thinking there was something more responsible that I needed to be doing. I don't, and I struggled with that again. I've struggled with that on and off. I don't know where that comes from, that sense that, you should be doing something more
important. Yeah.
serious, like
capitalistic mindset
Right.
that just fed. Because like I kind of still to this day kind of feel that way. Like I could be doing something more important.
Right. Or you ask yourself, should I be working at a soup kitchen? Should I be like housing refugees? What is the best use of my life?
It's so
But then you
funny.
go back to like how you felt doing that play. And like telling stories is something we've done since we could tell stories. And it's also really important to just life.
Well, and it changes how we understand ourselves. I do think storytelling, and that's where I finally have come to, because I do think that our culture devalues art and artists and thinks of it as frivolous. And, and that's a struggle with regards to getting actors to be paid for their work, because we're considered to be a frivolous thing and we get paid in applause or some nonsense.
It's so funny you mention this, because I just had a discussion with a good friend. I won't mention the person's name at this point in time, but I'm trying to help raise funds for a production. And she's fighting me because she says, well, people, why should they give money to theater? Because there are important reasons out there. People are hungry and whatever. And I'm trying to explain to her, well, arts are up there too, and people need the arts and they deserve to be paid and they deserve to be recognized. And so it's just funny that people still have that impression,
it's a weird bias that it's that the things of the spirit are not as important as the things of the body. I think it comes back to that same dichotomy. Like in spiritual people will always tell you the things of the flesh don't matter. But it's always a split, It's if you're working for the things of the spirit and the things of the mind, you need to be out there with a job. You need to be helping people pay their bills and put food in their mouth. And if you're worried too much about that, then people tell you, it's your spirit that matters. You need to stop, being subservient to the fleshy needs.
But then even when you look at something like, I'm a businessman on Wall Street. Okay, do you have business cards? Who designed your business card? Who drew that design? Like an artist, or it's fine to spend millions of dollars on like a big budget movie because you can watch that what do you do when you're depressed? You go home and you watch your favorite movie. That's art too. It's like some forms of art we've like determined that's okay, but like theater or, painting, that's not important. But
and what people also, I think, forget, and so we're on target, Amanda, is the fact that it also is something that you spend, in essence, your life on doing, or in terms of even the show you're on, it's not your life, but it's like, why I encourage people to go to live theater, especially, is because people put so much time into it. And we'll segue into the show you're both working on right now. And people don't realize that, they just come and, you put together like Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland, one weekend. We just put this together. And so let's talk a little bit
slightly more than a weekend and a paper
clip. Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the play you're both working on now together. And I'm so excited about it, Calendar Girls. And Calendar Girls, by the way, is going to open when?
February 10th.
Okay. So it's opening February 10th. It is now Hendersonville Theater, they call it now, instead of Hendersonville. It's Hendersonville Theater. And even though it's opening on February 10th, it's January 19th, I guess now. We're taping this. And how long have you been working on it already?
Our first rehearsal was January 4th.
Okay.
So we rehearse generally 4 nights a week with the cast. And then we have had about 3 production meetings so far. So we also meet at least once a week with the designers, and then each designer and director and stage manager are spending personal time outside of those hours to make what goes on in those meetings relevant. And then that doesn't even count all the hours we spent doing auditions and callbacks.
Yeah.
And on top of that, all the time you spend memorizing scripts and, learning the play itself.
Hopefully the actors are doing that now.
Exactly. And for the benefit of folks who don't know it, if you can kind of give a Reader's Digest summary of what Calendar Girls is about, because folks are in for a treat, I think, if they see this one. What's it about?
It's a real charming show. So it follows the plot of the film, which I think was from 1989 or 1990. But the theater version is told in theater style. So it doesn't look like the movie, but the story is basically, it's based on a true story of a group of friends at the Women's Institute in Yorkshire. And I want to say that it was like in 1989, right?
I want to say, yeah, it was like the 80s or early 90s.
Yeah. And they, you know, a Women's Institute is, what would it be like here?
We don't have anything like club, but a club is not really the same thing. But you know,
with cultural enrichment kind of.
Yeah, like you get together and you do hobbies together and you work in the community and you have events. And
so it was a ladies club, for lack of a better word. But anyhow, one of them's husband becomes sick and passes away, and and they decide that as a gift in honor of him, they want to replace the settee in the waiting room where the families of the patients have to sit waiting for news about their loved ones, because it's old and ratty,
and terrible, pokey, awful.
Right. So they want to give a gift in honor of this dead husband. And they're going to do this by the money that they're doing. They do a calendar every year, but the calendar doesn't raise enough money, the normal ones that they do, pictures of churches and whatnot. And so they get this idea that what would really sell would be a different sort of calendar. And then the rest of the story is about the process of talking themselves and everyone around them into getting on board with making this calendar, and what happens to them afterwards when the calendar goes worldwide. These women literally became globally famous for this calendar, and how their friendship is challenged and reaffirmed, how their confidence level, their bonds, their feelings about themselves change and grow and become strengthened by this experience. I think it's ultimately about the power of friendship, and the fact that a good friendship and a good sense of humor and a little bit of cheekiness will get you through a lot of hard times.
In some respects, it almost sounds like a female version of the Full Monty. You know,
there's some similarities,
in terms of the guys getting together, and then these women,
the character arcs and the growth and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. And you should mention, if I can put you on the spot a little bit, so you're saying a different kind of calendar, girl, and I'll ask you first of all, is this appropriate for children?
I'm not sure how the theater is deciding.
Yeah, I don't know what I would call that.
I mean, you're not going to see anything.
All suggestion.
It's burlesque.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're not going to see, I mean, you shouldn't. If I've done my job and the props team have done their job, you will have an experience of implication more than you will have an experience of having seen anything that you might wish you hadn't seen. Or might wish you had seen it.
So again, would it be appropriate for children? What age
would say? Maybe more like a older, like PG-13-ish kind of situation. Less really, honestly, because again, it's all suggestion, but more just kind of for the themes, I think, of the show more than anything else. I'm not taking my 8-year-old to see it.
Okay, there we go. I was like, let's ask like in a mom.
And I'm not even like the greatest mother, because she was in Beautiful Cages, which is not child appropriate, but like she didn't watch Beautiful Cages.
But she did go on right after gunshots.
Yeah. And screams and yes. So I'm not like the best and most like I'm not big on like I police what my kids watch, but not to a huge degree, but I would not bring my children.
Okay. Well,
and probably more anything than it just might cause you to have conversations you're maybe not ready to have with them yet.
It seems like a good show, though. You said 13 or older, in that a lot of important things that are discussed in this, and the value of friendships and relationships. And what's also
so one of the characters says in the second act. Anyway, her point is that her mom had died of breast cancer because she was too embarrassed of her body to let the doctor see her breasts. And her larger point is that if we don't stop being that our thinginess and our conservative thinginess about our bodies can get in the way of all kinds of healthiness, not just regular checkups, but your own feelings about your body and your confidence as well. So I think there are really important themes about owning your body and not walking in shame and stuff like that I think is it's really important, particularly in a really conservative part of the world where we might tend to be a little more embarrassed of our bodies and carry shame.
Just very body positive. And I don't know if we mentioned it's middle-aged women. It's not like women in their 20s, so
it's not like a really peep show of hot
even to me, I'm in my 30s. It's inspiring to me and helps me kind of see the importance of that confidence. So I think that would actually be good for maybe a younger woman to view that hey, getting older doesn't mean that you have to be old or
right.
And one of the cool things I think about you putting on the show, or Hendersonville putting on the show too, is that it gives a chance then, and I'll have you talk about some of the performers, if you will, Brandy, of actors in the area who aren't the typical 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old, actor. Because again, a lot of people have told me, and you probably have heard it as well too, is that Asheville, this area, or I guess nationwide, it's tough for women to get parts over a certain age, a lot of parts for young women. And so talk a little bit about the cast then you put together for this. And again, one of the things that's a challenge, I guess, is this not a little 2, 3, 4 person play? You have a lot of people in this play, considering.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about the cast, if you would.
So, actually, as a feminist theater practitioner, I am very proud of the theaters, in almost every community I've ever lived in or taught in or worked in. The women are 2 to 1 in terms of the actor pool versus the men. And yet season after season after season after season, they produce plays written by men featuring 5 men and 2 women. Yeah. One of them 70 and one of them's 18. And you see this over and over. And I think, what is are you not awake? How? And so and this community is no exception. We are lousy with smart, funny, middle-aged, talented actresses. And to see the theaters that many of them seem to have become awakened to this and are programming their seasons with plays full of parts for those women, makes me so happy. I know Hart did Little Women last year. I'm seeing a bunch of those, the Red Velvet Cake and the Savannah Sipping Society. And, those aren't my favorite kind of plays, but it's roles for it's meaty, juicy, interesting roles for women of a certain age. And
who wrote this play?
This one, Tim Firth.
Oh, so it's a guy that wrote it.
Yeah, a fellow wrote this one.
Okay.
I don't have the script in front of me.
That's good. But talk a little bit about it, though. You're talking about the cast, since we mentioned it. Yeah. Talk about some of the women you do have in this play and who's going to be in it.
So that's been another cool thing. Since I'm new, I had one friend. I directed my friend Jennifer Russ in a 1-act play at the Magnetic last year. And so I asked her to come and audition. And, I sent the word out. I've made a few friends, but I have a pretty small, the number of shows I've been in, I have a certain number of women, and those are the actor friends that I have. Yeah. So it was really just putting the word out and being open. And so I am just meeting everyone in our cast except for Jennifer Russ.
And Jennifer Russ, by the way, I'm so glad you have her. Real talent. I love her as a performer. And so excited she's back acting again, because I had seen her many years ago in Parkway. She did a bunch of plays and hadn't done a bunch of plays for a while. Very big talent. So she's one of the performers to be seen in this. Who else is in it?
A woman named Cece Blackburn is playing Chris. Then I think a woman named Laurie Morris. And then Beth Norris. Do they have
Beth
the same last
yeah.
name?
No,
It's Norris and
Norris and Morris. Which is like when I'm typing things, I'm like, okay.
So Beth is one of the associate or assistant artistic directors at Hendersonville. Yeah. So I'm sure she's going to be very familiar to her Hendersonville theater community. She's in it. Really,
Jennifer Treadway.
Yes, a wonderful, charming woman.
Also teaches at Blue Ridge Community College. Alexandra McPherson.
Okay. And let's see.
Who are we? Denise Lockett, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Okay, do we get all the calendar girls? I feel like we skipped one. 2, 3, 4, 5, I have to do this all the time. There's so many of them. I have to count. Okay, who have I left out? Okay, we got Annie and Chris. We got Celia. We got Cora. We got Jesse, and we got Ruth. Okay, that was all the calendar girls. Okay. Then Denise, who's also in the Magnetic Show with me, Denise Lockett. And then we have 2 wonderful guys, Tate Albert, who I think is just opening in the 39 Steps now. So we don't have him this week. He'll come back to us. And John Baldwin, really talented fellow who I believe is directing something out at Hendersonville Theater later in the season. And then, our production, speaking of wearing multiple hats, our production manager for the show is also playing 2 of the roles.
Yes.
They're playing 2 of the guy roles that I wanted to double. So they're playing that.
Their name is Rowan Duncan.
Rowan Duncan, thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
And then who else did I miss?
Annika.
Oh yeah, and she hasn't done, like, I can't remember if ever.
Yes, not much.
She had done some performing maybe a long time ago, and she kind of wanted to sing. And so she came in and did the season auditions, and she was just so interesting and charming that I was like, well, this isn't a musical, but I'd like to call you back for this part. And she came in with like a totally different character. Like she'd done some hardcore character work, and she just came in and floated in as this totally other person. I was like, sold. Okay. There's our little Elaine. So
that's our one young member.
That's our one young cast member. So I'm real excited to have her. And I'm hoping she'll catch the bug and we'll start seeing more of her.
Well, the whole cast just seems delightful. I mean, I know certainly a bunch of them.
Joan Richardson.
Mm-hmm.
Super
Joan Richardson, sure, I know. And what's so cool about this, just what you were saying, Brandy, is a lot of these folks I've not seen in a lot of stuff, because again, they're not typically the stuff cast most plays in the area. So it's so exciting to see a bunch of these folks as well. Let me just ask you a couple other questions. One having to do with your role, Brandy, in terms of, and I asked this of a lot of actors/directors, but you've now acted in Asheville. You've also directed now. Do you have a preference as to doing one or the other, acting or directing?
Amanda and I were kind of talking about this. I find directing to be really hard, all consuming. There's no breaks. I mean, I was writing a script in my head for our promo video at 3:00 this morning instead of sleeping. I find that I do a lot of things at 3:00 in the morning when I'm laying in bed, supposed to be sleeping for this show. I'm doing it all the time. It doesn't leave space for anything. I don't remember the last time I did laundry. I feel like I'm running from one requirement. Okay, first, don't forget you have to meet with this person, and don't forget after that you have to meet with this person, and then rehearsal, and then you have to. And so I don't think I have more than one big one of these in me a year. So even though I love it, I don't find acting nearly as exhausting, and as I don't feel that it seeps into every crack and crevice of my life the way this is doing. And so I enjoy that, but I wouldn't enjoy that on a regular basis. So I feel like going forward, this is kind of great for me because I'm doing a bunch of auditions right now, and I've got a couple of next projects scheduled for the rest of the year. And so in my perfect world, I would, I think, direct one thing and maybe act in 2, maybe 3 things if they were small. And that would be my year.
It's funny, Amanda, Brandy says that, because oftentimes I'll ask actors who are also directors, what they prefer. And most people do say they prefer directing. The reason being they don't tell people, though, is they don't have to memorize anything. So that's they don't tell you that. But let me ask you also in terms of
I think I have the whole show just about memorized.
It's funny. Yeah, I was about to say, like, that's funny because as a stage manager, I feel like I have to memorize everyone's line. Exactly.
Well, and what I've seen also, Amanda, is unfortunately when somebody gets sick, I've too oftentimes seen the director will come in and have to
and we've already had one COVID scare, so we wore masks for 10 days, but thankfully we were all negative, and so knock wood.
By the way, people who are going to see this, and it's interesting, I don't necessarily like it, but it seems a lot of theaters now going back to having people wear masks. Has Hendersonville done that yet?
No, I think it's like mask if you feel like
okay.
But we only mask like as a group if we feel like that's necessary to keep everyone safe.
Sure.
As far as the audience, I don't think.
Yeah, we did it to follow CDC guidance, and because so many of our cast, like me and Tate, we're also in other casts, and so I was asking people to consider masking so we don't cross breed germs, and if their cast comes down with something, and I think 39 Steps was dealing with laryngitis and pink eye, and I don't know what all those poor guys had, and I was like, okay, so it's good that Tate is wearing a mask because we brought a COVID scare over to them, and they were bringing pink eye over to us. So we were like, you know what, let's just all wear masks, like let's consider when we should be masking so that we're not bringing the entire city to its knees, theatrically speaking.
And to recap on this show, if I could just ask you the dates and location and how to get tickets, and I'll have one final question after that. But if people want to see Calendar Girls, I'm recommending they certainly should make an attempt to do so. Dates of it and where and how to get tickets.
The show runs Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The Sunday is a matinee, right? Yes. So for 2 weekends, so it'll be, I think that's 10, 11, and 12, and 17, 18, and 19 of February. And tickets can be procured from the Hendersonville Theater webpage. And it's really on the front page. All you have to do is Google Hendersonville Theater, click on Hendersonville Theater's webpage, and scroll down, and it's got like current shows, and Calendar Girls is the second thing that you'll find on the front page, and takes you directly to the ticket link.
And we should mention also Hendersonville theater spelled correctly. Is that correct? R-E. R-E. So look for it that way. And last question I'll ask both of you, or first ask Amanda. So after this is over, this is consuming your time for the next couple of weeks, what else is on your agenda?
I'm sorry, are you asking me?
Yeah, what else is on your agenda?
Sorry, I had a moment there. Okay, so next for me is the show Trillium at Hendersonville Theater. I've been cast in that, and it only runs for 1 weekend. The last weekend, that's like the last bit of March into April, and it's an original work. So I'm really excited to do that. Go from stage managing into my acting.
Okay, look forward to seeing you in that. And Brandy, the same thing too. As you're doing this, you're also acting as well. Right now. What are you doing?
So this weekend, I'll be kind of glad that this is going to happen and then be over because we're about getting into the hard part for Calendar Girls. So it'd be great if I had a little bit more brain space, but I'm super excited about this project at the Magnetic called Riveted. It's also a brand new play, local playwright who's a feminist folk singer songwriter, and she had this story on her heart for such a long time, and she couldn't find anyone to write it with her, and finally she just thought, well, by golly, I'm going to write it myself. And I can't believe how much American women's history this woman managed to cram into 1 2-hour play about 3 generations of women. So the grandma was a Rosie the Riveter during World War II. The mom, the daughter, her daughter, which is me, came of age during Vietnam and ran off across the border to Canada in protest against the Vietnam War. And she was part of the second wave feminist movement. And then her daughter, and I can't remember Chelsea's last name from Sarge.
Gaddy. Chelsea Gaddy.
Yes. Yeah. Chelsea plays my daughter, and she's a young woman in her 30s with a career, but also pregnant, and she's making some decisions that the third wave feminists were kind of more interested. The second wave feminists were super interested in their careers, and the third wave feminists started making sacrifices and, you know, taking leaves of absence to stay home with their children, and things that made their mothers nervous in terms of how to balance and keep everything. So the tension among these women regarding how you define motherhood, and how you define womanhood, what should be important to you, how should you live your life, how should you fight against injustice, should you fight against injustice, what's considered unjust, is basically feminist theory and women's history boiled down into these three interesting women and all of these ancillary characters in their lives that come about as memories of the grandma. And it's just such a good story.
And to finish the shout out, you should mention the author was, if you mentioned, it's Erin.
No, the author is Deborah Silverstein,
yeah,
and
Erin directed it.
Erin McCarson is directing.
Right.
Yep, and a really talented music fellow named Steve Sensenig is music directing, and it's challenging, fun music. And so it's a lot more work than a normal stage reading, because normally if it's a stage reading, you're just going to read from your book. You maybe have 2 to 3 rehearsals and then you go. We've had hours of music boot camp and a number of rehearsals trying to learn the music so that we're not trying to sight read it in the thick of the moment. And so anyways, that and our first performance sold out so quickly that we had to add a second performance. So there are 2 performances on Saturday. One's at 2:00, I think, and the other one's at 7.
And that's at the Magnetic Theater. I'm looking
forward to the Magnetic Theater. Yep.
So,
and Amanda will be there.
They're doing a virtual option too.
Oh, that's right. And you can also, if you're not feeling well or you really wanted to be in the 7:00 show, but it's sold out, they're selling virtual live tickets so that you can be to the 7:00 show virtually. And that show, Deborah will be doing a talk back after that show.
What, the one at night?
The one at, the 7:00.
Okay, great. Well, it's certainly something to look forward to. So I'll see you then. I'll see you at Calendar Girls, and Amanda, look forward to seeing you in this and stage managing this one, and then in the next play. So certainly you both are going to be busy over the next couple of months, I guess.
Yeah.
So anyway, thanks very much for being a guest on this edition of the Blaine's World Show. I'd also like to thank my producer, Cappy Tassetti, and hopefully we'll see you all sometime in the near future. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to sign off and then stay with me for a second.